Hey, welcome back to Anti-Social Studies. My name is Emily Glankler, and today I'm going to write the first SAQ from the 2022 AP World History exam. I want to do this, and I want to do it live, meaning I have not looked at this question really since it got released a few months ago, and I have definitely not thought through what my answer would be, because I want to show you how I would approach writing the SAQ if I was doing it on a real exam. And so I'm going to give myself maximum 15 minutes. In reality, when you're taking the AP exam, you have 40 minutes to answer 3 full SAQs, and so that comes out to about 13 minutes per question. So I think 10 to 15 minutes for each one is the right amount of time. All right, let's jump into it. So the question's about the Mongols, which I'm already excited about because I know a lot about the Mongols. So the way I would approach the SAQ is I would first skim through the 3 questions they're going to ask me before I dive into this document, just so that I can get an idea of what types of questions they're going to ask me, but so that I can skim the document effectively and efficiently. Because one of the biggest pitfalls of the SAQ section is just timing. It can be really tempting to want to overwrite and write too long of an answer and go too much in depth on these short answer questions, which is totally fine. Which is totally fine. It's way better to write too much than not enough. The only problem is a lot of students will write way too much on the first few questions, and then they run out of time because you have 40 minutes to answer essentially 9 of these little mini, right? ABC, ABC, ABC. Okay, so let's look at 1, A, B, and C. They're gonna want me to identify an economic development that would support his argument. They're gonna want me to find evidence that would challenge this guy's argument, and then explain how a transfer exchange resulted from the Mongol conquest. That one I can kind of already think of. So really what I'm skimming this document for essentially is I need to know what this historian's argument is about the Mongols, because 2 of the 3 questions are either like, okay, support this argument or go against it. So let me now skim to figure out what his argument is. That's not what I'm really looking for. As always, we want to read the source information word for word. So this is Mikhail Biran, a historian, The Mongol Transformation from the Steppe to Eurasian Empire, published in 2004. Doesn't give me a lot of information, but I'm glad I read it, just in case. Sometimes it does have really valuable information. So he's saying the Mongol conquest had been defined as the last chapter of the Eurasian transformations, yet with the same or even better justification, they can also be regarded as, this sounds like he's getting into his argument, they can be regarded as the first chapter of a new era, perhaps the early modern one. The Mongol period was a significant step towards closer integration of the old world. Certainly the vast dimensions of the empire contributed, but the role of the Mongols is not limited to being the passive medium through which their subjects learn from one another. Instead, they actively promoted intercultural exchange. Okay, so he's basically doing this very traditional argument where he's doing counter argument. Like, hey, a lot of people say the Mongols sort of ended an era, right? They ended this era of Eurasian transformations before a new one begins. But he's like, but I'm arguing something different. I'm arguing they actually were the reason why a new era began. So I'm just gonna sort of summarize this up here, maybe even just in my notes. Again, if you're gonna be choosing the digital exam where you can type your answers, jotting down notes, or I would maybe otherwise be annotating and writing off to the side. So his argument essentially is the Mongols started, emphasis on started, a new era, the early modern era. And he also goes on later, he says, they weren't just the passive medium, like they weren't just the ones passing along innovations, like, oh, they take the compass from China and pass it along, that they're actively promoting intercultural exchange. They were actively promoting exchange, new ideas, new tech innovations. Okay, so that's essentially his argument. So now let me go and read these questions in more detail. Identify 1 economic development that would support his argument regarding the Mongols and the integration of the old world. So since they've pulled out a quote, I want to go back and read that one sentence that has this quote. So where is that? The Mongol period was a significant step toward closer integration of the old world, both inside and outside the empire's realm. And all they want is for me to identify 1 economic development that would support that. So I would say, to me, I'm thinking of like the Silk Road and the fact that the Mongol Empire kind of encompassed almost the entire Silk Road, which allowed for like trade to occur more safely and more quickly. So I would say, and I just need to identify, so I just need to name it and explain it in enough detail that the reader knows that I know what I'm talking about. So the Mongol conquests unified almost the entire Silk Road. That's kind of my answer. Now I just need to prove that I know what I'm talking about here, right? I mean, a lot of students stop here with identify, and I don't think that's quite enough, because I think you want to make sure that the reader knows that you're not just like throwing something out and hoping it's right, that you really like fully define your answer so that they know you know what you're talking about. So the Mongol conquest unified almost the entire Silk Road by providing one overarching government with strict laws. Merchants could travel the entire length of this trade network from China to the Middle East safely and quickly. Okay, I'm going to just stop there and I'm going to move on to B. This is the trick with SAQs, is you want to go quickly. It's very similar to a multiple choice strategy where you want to make sure you have to get through all of the questions, even if that means you're rushing a little bit. And then if you have time at the end, you can go back and you can kind of flesh out your answers a little bit more. So I think this is fine. I'm going to go through and I'm going to answer A, B, and C. And then when I look up, I'm going to see how much of my 15 minutes I have left. And if I have time, I might go back in and add 1 or 2 more sentences. Again, if you're typing, this is very easy. If you're handwriting, you can still, I encourage all of my students to write A and write their answer for A. You can leave it 1 or 2 lines before you start your answer for B, so that if you decide you want to go and add more in, you can. Side note, you can answer these questions in whatever order you want. I'm going to go A, B, and C just for simplicity's sake. But if I wanted to answer C first, I could. That'd be totally fine. All right, B. Now that I want to explain, so I needed to do a little bit more here. Explain how one piece of evidence would challenge his argument regarding the Mongols and the first chapter of A New Era. So again, they've quoted, so I'm going to go back and read that sentence. So, with the same or even better justification, the Mongols can also be regarded as the first chapter of a new era, perhaps the early modern one. So he is arguing that the Mongols started the early modern era, and they want me to explain a piece of evidence that would challenge that. So with challenging an argument, I can go one of 2 ways. I could either find a piece of evidence that basically contradicts what he's saying about the Mongols, be like, no, the Mongols weren't actually that modern. Or I can be like, there's a better group or a better event that actually begins this new era. And for me, my brain's going to that one because I'm having a hard time thinking of how to argue. I do actually think the Mongols were really modern. I actually like his argument. So I think a better way would be to say, okay, no, the Mongols didn't start the early modern era because this other thing did. And this other thing to me is very clearly the Columbus voyages and Columbus kind of discovering the new world. So let me just read the question one more time. How one piece of evidence would challenge his argument regarding the Mongols in the first chapter of A New Era. So I'm going to kind of format this like a teeny little mini kind of thesis statement almost. Like, while the Mongol era did facilitate many exchanges and the transfer of important knowledge, the true event that should be considered the, and I'm going to quote here, first chapter of the early modern era is the voyages of Columbus and the European age of exploration. This contradicts Buren's assertion that the Mongols were more than a passive medium, because in this case, they did help transfer navigational technology from Asia to Europe. And I want to be specific here. Navigational technology like the compass and innovative ship designs. Okay, what am I saying here? So I'm saying, but the Mongols themselves were not innovating new navigational technology that would lead to this new era. In fact, the few times they attempted naval conquest, like in Japan, they failed. Okay, so let me make sure I didn't go off on too big of a tangent here, because I'm worried I might have. So they're basically saying, like, you need to challenge his argument that the Mongols started the early modern era. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, nope, they didn't start the early modern era. The Europeans did. Columbus did. Now, I don't to be clear, I don't know that I even love the argument that I'm making, but I still think it's a good argument. I still think you could support it. So again, I'm essentially saying the Europeans and the Age of Exploration is the true beginning of this early modern era. And I'm like, yeah, sure. The Mongol conquest helped facilitate where new technology could get to Europe to start this era. But that actually is that goes against him saying, oh, the Mongols did more than just pass along technology. I'm basically providing evidence to say, well, actually, they kind of just did in this case. So again, the goal is to contradict his argument, which is what I've done here. The contradict argument is a really confusing one for a lot of students because, right, you can sometimes get so myopic and so focused on the argument the historian is actually making that you're like, yeah, that seems like a really good one. Then when the College Board asks you to contradict it, it's hard to think of something. So again, you can always approach this really in one of two ways. I could have either said like, no, the Mongols were trash and like didn't do anything modern. Or I can say, no, the Mongols were great, but here's actually a better example, a better piece of evidence to support like starting a new era. It's not that his argument is wrong, it's that like I'm finding a stronger argument. Either one of those are fine. And I kind of ended up doing a mix of both. I said, the Mongols actually weren't that great at navigational technology and naval conquest, which is really the thing that's going to start this new era. So I kind of ended up doing a mix of both. Okay. C, explain how one intercultural transfer or exchange resulted from the Mongol conquests. Okay, so this one's just like, it can have to do with anything, right? They just want me to explain a intercultural transfer or exchange. So from one culture to another. Now I've already kind of talked about navigational technology, so I would love to avoid doing that again, right? You want to try to have 3 unique answers. Although if the only thing I can think of is like navigational technology, that's fine. I think what I'm going to do is gunpowder because, yeah, let's do that. Okay, because that really is like different cultures. Okay, perfect. So one significant intercultural exchange from the Mongol conquests was the development of gunpowder technology. When the Mongols conquered China, the Chinese had already created gunpowder and some fairly simple weapons like fire lancets. Fairly simple but ineffective weapons like fire lancets. However, the Mongols gathered experts and innovators from all over Eurasia, including metal workers from Europe, to create more sophisticated gunpowder, to create more sophisticated gunpowder weapons like the cannon. This radically transformed Eurasia, and in the wake of the Mongol Empire rose new, stronger gunpowder empires. Okay, that might be overkill, that might be more than I need, but again, when they ask you to explain, you do want to really make sure that you explain it in enough detail that they know you really understand what you're talking about. The key with short answer questions is to just fully explain one thing, right? So the biggest trap that a lot of students fall into is they want to list 2 or 3 exchanges that occurred because of the Mongols. No, it's way better to pick one, just gunpowder, and then fully explain it. That's way better than like kind of explaining 2 or 3, right? You really only need one answer for each of these. So again, if you look back at A, I'm saying, well, unifying the Silk Road. That's the one thing I'm going to talk about. B, I'm just talking about like the Columbian Exchange and the Age of Exploration. That's my answer. Now I'm going to fully explain all the ways that that connects to his argument and other evidence and whatever, but all about that one thing. So same with C, I could probably list out 5 or 10 important exchanges that occurred because of the Mongol conquest. But the short answer is not an essay, and it's asking you to pick one and then really clearly explain it in detail. So now I have really like 1 or 2 minutes left before, if I was taking the test, I'd want to move on to the next question. Honestly, if I was in the AP exam right now, I would just move on and I would get through my other 2 SAQs. And then if I had time, I would come back and reread this. But for the purpose of just sort of wrapping this up, I want to look through my 3 answers and just see if there's anything little that I can go back in and add. I want to be really clear. You should never go in and delete. If you're at this point of the test and you've already written out your 3 answers and now you go, I have a better answer. Do not fall into that trap. Don't go back and rewrite your whole SAQ, but I am going to go back and read the questions one more time and just make sure I specifically answered the question they were asking. So identify one economic development that would support his argument about the Mongols helping integrate the old world. And I said they unified the entire Silk Road. That is definitely an economic development. And then I explained it by providing one overarching government with strict laws, merchants could travel. I feel pretty good about that because it's just an identify question. That's it. B is the one I feel like I might have gone off on a tangent on, but let's just see. Explain how one piece of evidence would challenge his argument about the Mongols being the first chapter of the early modern era. And I'm saying, while they did facilitate exchanges, the true event that should be considered the first chapter is the voyages of Columbus and the European Age of Exploration. So I'm giving a very specific alternative, right? A contradiction to his argument. But I like what I did that I'm still connecting it back to the Mongols. So instead of going on a tangent about Christopher Columbus, I'm remembering that the whole focus of this SAQ is the Mongols. So I'm saying, hey, really, it's Columbus's voyages that starts this new early modern era. And the Mongols played a role in that, but it was a more passive role. So again, I think this is actually a pretty strong answer. Then question number 3, just explain one cultural exchange. I think I feel really good about the detail of gunpowder. I don't just say gunpowder. I talk about they got it from China. They brought in experts from other parts of the world, like in Europe, and they created something new. And then I also explain how that impacts world history. So there you have it. That's one of the SAQs. Again, this is from the 2022 AP World History exam. If you will like and subscribe, and the link in my comments is going to have a copy of my answer here if you want to kind of look along and see how I responded to this, and follow along for more AP history tips. Thanks.